Good afternoon, everybody. Or as the college students that I work with like to hear, good morning. It's 1:30. Does anyone have the clicker? Does anyone have the clicker on them? Yes, no? It's all part of the presentation. Just like everybody else and all TED Talks anywhere, everywhere, I want to start with a story. My wife and I just recently bought a home. And while my wife was really excited about the different kinds of things she was going to decorate the home with, and I as well have a little bit of an interior design gene in me, what I was really excited about was the grill. Yes, I pumped my typical testosterone, masculine sort of excitement. I'm excited to grill. And as my wife and I bought our grill, I was consulting with so many different people. What kind of grill should I buy? Should I be a purist and go with the charcoal? Should I be an innovator and go ahead and try to go with the gas, the infrared? What should I go with? Or should I be just a person who's all out crazy and get a smoker and decide that I don't want to eat for 8 hours? I went ahead and went with the charcoal grill. Really happy with it. A little bit too happy with it. Let me explain. In the beginning, my wife and I would just grill our typical dinner. We'd either make, maybe some chicken, some vegetables, or we'd go big and make some steak. And very soon we realized that you could grill a lot of things on a grill, that you didn't have to use the stove. And it was great because it was a little bit cheaper with charcoal, the house didn't smell afterwards, and the bill for air conditioning didn't shoot up. So we started to get a little bit creative. So we went from chicken to steak, and we actually tried something very unique, grilled pizza. It was delicious. It was crispy on the bottom side, it was nice and bubbly on the top, and being a Chicago native, you know that I love my pizza, all kinds of deep dish, pan, whatnot. Then we got a little bit too creative, and I'm talking like not in a good way. Grilled pie. Didn't work out the way that we had imagined it. Now this is an artist's rendition. I wasn't able to take a picture because I was trying to clear the smoke. But the reality is that the grill is great for some things, but not great for everything. In today's talk, I wanted to address something that we all struggle with at some point in our lives, and sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's family, sometimes it's social, and that is motivation. Nothing says motivation like Chuck Norris holding two guns with his shirt unbuttoned. And as you can see, the quote says, Chuck Norris doesn't need motivation, motivation needs Chuck Norris. Motivation is something that we all, as part of our human experience, deal with, that we struggle with. I don't know if it's finals week here at the University of Maryland, but at the University of Tennessee, where I'm the chaplain for the Muslim community, I'm talking about tons of unmotivated students and kids that I have to talk to and sort of give pep talks and work with to kind of find that motivation. Now, as being someone who is a trained English teacher, don't hold it against me, for high schools, and also someone who works in the community, there are a couple different tools that I noticed, and there are two that stand out when we talk about motivation. As you can see right here, a lot of parents will come to me and try to get me to help them convince their kids to be more motivated. No picture symbolizes teenage angst more than this one, all right? And also in the classroom, I work as a consultant with a lot of teachers. So the question they ask me is, how should we motivate our kids? How do we motivate our kids, our students? And some people just come and ask, how do I motivate myself? Well, the two tools that I'd like to talk about today are fear and hope. Let's start with fear. Fear, as shown by a study done by the California State University in Norfolk, has a lot of interesting ideas behind it. And what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the philosophy of fear, not quite the reactions, but where it comes from and what happens. Fear is an interesting tool that's used to motivate people. It's interesting because it gives a very quick response. Now, fear, for those of us who know, are one of the innate emotions that people have, that human beings are born with. It's found mainly in the amygdala, and it's one that we sort of kind of feel automatically. You see babies all the time get scared, especially when a big giant dude with a beard comes near them. Kids start crying. That's a great manifestation of fear. I try to have a big smile to sort of offset the beard, but anyways. They don't get the hipster culture yet. So with fear, what's interesting is that the response is almost immediate. People feel fear and this sort of response happens. Now, that is a great tool because what do we like more in this day and age than immediate responses? But what's found, interestingly, in this study mentions, it says that fear is used as a powerful motivator for oneself and other people. What was found later on in that same paragraph was that if the stimulus for the fearful event or the fearful reaction, if the stimulus is used too continuously or too repetitive, then the response will die down. It'll have a sort of apathetic response eventually. And so even though fear gives us a quick response, and we like that. And actually, fear doesn't really require much work on our end. It just requires a stimulus that we place in front of the person, like, I'm going to ground you, you're going to fail, or here's a spider. Whatever the stimulus is, that stimulus does the work. We actually don't have to do the work. So fear is a very interesting and potent tool, but if used for the long term, it's found to sort of harbor some sort of resentment, some apathy, and in political arenas, we find it harbors revolutions. Now, the other tool that is common, well, not too common as I'm going to contend, is hope. Now, what's the difference between fear and hope? Well, both are powerful motivators, as told to us in the study, but hope is a little bit different. See, hope isn't as quick of a response. Hope is one that takes some work to build up to. It still offers the same potency of motivation, but it doesn't happen as quickly. But one thing that's interesting that the study noted is that hope did not find, or the studies on hope did not find, that people harbored as much resentment. In fact, hope didn't really have any negative effects until there was a sort of paradox called the Stockdale paradox that we'll talk about towards the end. So hope in general was a little bit longer to get going, took a little bit more time to get the hope going, but at the end of the day, it didn't harbor that resentment or personal revolution that fear did. So what we'll talk about today are these two tools. And much like any tools, you can use them properly or improperly. Right? And so we're going to talk about today, how do we use hope and fear as tools of motivation, and how do we use them according to their essence properly, and not use them to cut salami like this drill or woodcutter. Now, in this day and age, this picture symbolizes to a lot of us the sort of millennial generation, someone who's always on the go. As you can see, she's running, she's actively moving forward. She has a phone. She has two phones, actually. She has one up on her ear, and then she has one in her left hand, okay? Never a good sign. And then she has all these papers falling out of her bundle of papers that she's running with. A lot of us can empathize with this lady in the photo. She's very busy. And in fact, in this society, we like nothing more as busy people than quick responses. I remember when 3G first came out on cell phones. I used to work at the Apple store as a sales representative. Sorry, I can't give you any discounts. But I used to work there, and I remember when 3G first came out, it was the biggest deal. Everyone was so excited. When they bought the new phone, they'd take off the film, they'd start it up and it would say 3G on the top, and it was like a miracle to them. Now, when I was traveling here from Knoxville, I remember I just got off the plane, I had taken my phone off airplane mode, and it could only get to 3G. It couldn't find any LTE, and I felt like my heart was destroyed, right? So we had this very quick moving society where we get very used to things extremely quickly, and we want things to happen quick. And this picture sort of symbolizes that. Now, because this is a very societal effect, it would be kind of dumb to assume that this didn't affect us in the institutional level, both in the families and in schools. So while we find that schools are supposed to be institutions which craft lifelong learners, people who are supposed to be educated citizens and scholars of their field, supposed to become beneficial citizens of humanity, we find that oftentimes on this long road of life where we're supposed to have a very long journey and not have short-term goals necessarily, or short-term that blankets the long-term, we find that in education or in schools, fear is used as a tactic. One of my favorite movies, Harry Potter. Fear is used as a tactic to sort of motivate students forward. And as a teacher, this bothers me a lot, because when I see students who are beaten over the head with the fear stick, I see them, they're very, very lifeless, and they don't really enjoy the classroom. Now, why do teachers use it? Like I said in the beginning, fear is a very quick responding emotion. But what's interesting is that there's a man by the name of Ron Clark, and I actually attended a seminar that he taught in Knoxville. And he started a school called the Ron Clark Academy. Now, what's interesting about Ron Clark is that he's not necessarily the most normal of educators, right? He's a very, very exuberant guy. In classes, he'll get up and start dancing, and he'll start making songs up about multiplication tables. But one thing that he did was he showed us that fear, as much as we may incline towards it, or be sort of naturally have this proclivity towards it to get people to do things that we want, it may not be the best tool. This is a picture of Ron Clark's school, his academy. Yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, what? As you can see, there is a staircase, but there's also a slide. And the most interesting thing about this school is that he bought a warehouse in the worst socioeconomic scenario in Atlanta, in the downtown, the heart of Georgia, in the heart of Atlanta, where everyone was telling him that these people are unmotivated. They have no motivation. These families are struggling. A lot of them have broken homes. A lot of them are on social welfare. There's no way you're going to get these kids to be motivated about school. And what's interesting is that in a few short years, I believe it was 3 years he mentioned, he got his school, the Ron Clark Academy, to be one of the highest performing schools in the state of Georgia. And my contention, my argument, my observation is that instead of using fear to motivate his students so much, he used a healthy amount of hope, and also probably a small mixture of fear, but a healthy amount of hope, and created an environment where the kids felt hopeful about their education. I mean, who wouldn't feel hopeful going to class down a huge tube slide? Or seeing Tutankhamun there in the corner. So, now, this also happens in the family as well. You see a lot of times, and you see this in Dr. Baumrin's research done in the 1920s about parenting styles, that you have a sort of difference in parenting styles. And one of them is the authoritarian parent. And this picture to me, although if you know the context, it's not exactly what I'm talking about, but it's a great representation facially, right? The expression, Franz Perls would love this in his Gestalt theory, of what they're feeling, right? So for those of you who don't know, spoiler alert, he is the father. Okay, so if you haven't seen it yet, Darth Vader is his dad. Now, this picture symbolizes this sort of tense, very fearful moment. And what happens is when kids are raised or kids are brought up or mentored by their biological parents or adopted parents or whoever, and this is my experience as a chaplain, as a youth director, I noticed that what happens is parents and kids often tend to fight. And so how then do we utilize these two tools? Now, my contention is not that we should use one necessarily over the other, because both of them have their place. Each and every one of us probably owns a microwave. And although I necessarily wouldn't use a microwave to grill a steak, it's probably great to warm up a cup of tea that has gone cold, or maybe some leftovers that you just want to quickly eat. The microwave has its place, but I wouldn't put something that needed to be carefully crafted in a sort of artisan dish in a microwave. It has its place, it has its purpose as a tool, but it can't do everything. In the same way, so the microwave represents here fear. In the same way, the grill that I fell in love with in the beginning, we all remember the steak looked good, the pizza looked really good, but the pie, none of y'all would eat that on Thanksgiving. And so what happens then when hope is misused? This is a great example of probably a lot of us as students, we've all felt this at some degree in our studies and our preparations for classes, that we will do all the things tomorrow, right? And this is an example of when hope is misused. Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, talks about this in something he calls, or he labels, the Stockdale paradox. He tells us a story about an Army veteran who was caught, I believe, in the Vietnam War and was held captive for 8 years. His name was Jim Stockdale. And Jim Stockdale, as he was being interviewed by Jim Collins, he was asked, he said, what was it that you could survive 8 years of torture, of trauma, of this behavior, of this sort of treatment that would normally evoke a lot of fear in us? And obviously the captors were probably, or the captors were probably trying to evoke fear in the captives. How did you survive this? And he gave the example of the Stockdale paradox. He said that you have to have a lot of hope, or he uses the word faith, retain faith that you will prevail in the end regardless of the difficulty. That is what a lot of us use as hope. But the problem is, if we set unrealistic expectations for hope, then we find, just like the pie and the grill, we'll find ourselves oftentimes coming short. So he says, in order to counter this unbridled, unrealistic hope, the way that you sort of mechanize this tool is by confronting the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. And so there's sort of balance in the hope even, that it's not just one side or the other, it's not just fear or hope, one is better than the other, but in fact there is a sort of meeting in the middle, a melding of the two. And so when we find ourselves asking ourselves this question, what are the key tools of motivation, and how should we motivate ourselves, other people, family members, students, whoever we work with? My contention, or my offering, my suggestion and call to action is to ask ourselves two questions. And this is whenever we encounter a situation where we have to ask ourselves how motivation is going to be achieved, we have to ask ourselves, question number one, what are the circumstances around the event? So for example, if we go back to the metaphor about the pie, I'm trying to bake a pie. Does what the grill have to offer, is that the best way to cook that pie? Or is there another tool that's better used? Or perhaps, in a more advanced fashion, a combination of two tools. So we have to ask ourselves, what are the circumstances around this event? The second is that what are the desired goals in the motivation? Do we want a long-term goal that might take a little bit longer to get started? Or are we looking to achieve a short-term goal that may have long-term resentment if we keep using it over and over again ad nauseum? And so it is with this that I hope we can take a step back and analyze and evaluate situations before we decide how to motivate ourselves and other people to better the human experience. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.